Captain's Log, July 26, 2016. I talked about this the other night on our San Diego Comic-Con roundup a little bit, but I've been getting a lot of requests to go a little bit more in depth into it, so I'll talk about everything we know so far. There's not a great deal yet with Star Trek Discovery, but we, of course, have the ship design. We've seen a teaser of it pulling out out of space dock, really crude CGI compared to what I'm sure the show's going to look like ultimately. And we know that the show and the ship are called Star Trek Discovery. We have a registry number that gives us a sense of what era it might be set in, and we have a little bit more about era, and for sure that it's in the Prime continuity from the horse's mouth from Bryan Fuller. But that is pretty much what we know so far, so I'll just kind of go down the list in those things and what I think about stuff as far as we understand it right now, and what I'm hoping for, and what I'm kind of anticipating, and maybe make a couple of small predictions. So we know for sure now that it's not an anthology show, which I was really surprised to hear, especially given that initial teaser that didn't show us anything at all from the show, but just had a kind of words on the screen and was like new races, new enemies, and it said new crews. And Fuller made a really big deal in a recent interview about the idea with new crews being that we're going to see a whole lot of different characters and different crews on different starships. So if you think that the Discovery looks really stupid, just remember that you're going to get to see lots of other starships and probably get to fall in love with some other crews and see some of those characters get fleshed out. But he says, since we're doing a full-blown 13-episode story, and none of the episodes are going to be standalone, and I like the way he put this, he said, usually in episodic television, there's all kinds of things you would just brush over, that when you're writing it more like a novel, you've got time to stay there and smell the roses and really flesh stuff out, and that's really exciting. So that's what it meant by new crews. Now, I gotta say, I am a little bit, I'm a little disappointed by the fact that it's not going to be an anthology show, because I was kind of excited to maybe have my cake and eat it too, get to jump around to a lot of different eras, and I talked about this a lot on a previous Captain's Log. I was really hoping that we would get to see post Romulus destruction in Prime continuity, and it looks like that's not going to happen, at least anytime soon. Who knows how long this show is going to go, and if they have maybe a set plan for how many years they would want it to go. Since it's more tight storytelling, there's every possibility that it would only make sense to go for 3 or 4 years, and then maybe if it's successful, they would jump to another era and do some other sort of show. So I think it's important to note that just because it's not an anthology doesn't mean that we might not eventually get to go to some other eras in the not too distant future, and if it does really well, I suppose it's always possible that we could see a couple of shows on at the same time, but that's of course obviously jumping the gun real hard. The registry number on the Discovery is 1031, and Fuller's not coming right out and saying what era it's set in. I like the way he put this, almost tongue-in-cheekly. He was like, we just don't want to overwhelm people yet. I'm like, no, that's not overwhelming. Everybody wants to know what era this is set in. And of course, the rumor for a long time was that it was going to be just post Star Trek VI, and that Nicholas Meyer was going to get to build on the events there with the Klingons becoming allies with the Federation and all of that. That is not what's happening now. He came right out and said that. And with that registry number, that would seem to confirm that it's probably somewhere between Enterprise and the original series, because of course the original Enterprise, the registry number is 1701, and this ship is 1031, so it is in the NCC days post Enax, but it's before the Enterprise, and it looks like well before. So what's really odd about that for potential for guest stars and things, and I would expect to see lots of alum actors. He was asked the question, might we see some characters that we recognize? He said maybe eventually, you know, down the road, but I would expect that we'll probably get to see some actors that we've seen before get to come in and play new roles, maybe, or at least I'm hoping for that, certainly. But also, if this is indeed set in a post-Enterprise pre-TOS time period, really the only characters you could very easily use that we know already are Enterprise characters, unless you did some crazy time travel stuff. And that's a thing that's not going to be a big deal to anybody but major Trekkies, and major Trekkies that were, well, and anybody that was just an Enterprise fan. I mean, I have met some folks that really like Enterprise and don't care about any other Star Trek. There are a few of those. I know it feels like 15 people watched Enterprise, but there were a few more than that. And what's so surreal in my brain right now is that all of a sudden, and I don't know if it's just because it's the last show we had, or if it's just a period in time in the Star Trek canon that is so open and loose that it's exciting potentially for people to get to write in that world and play in it in that particular era. But with, not to give hopefully too much away if you haven't gotten to see Beyond yet, but Star Trek Beyond builds some on Enterprise and uses that period specifically. Is a thing that I'm sure a lot of people saw, and that would have gone completely over their heads. They didn't even realize that. And now we're going to get a TV show that is probably going to do that. And that is so strange in my brain. I hope that doesn't turn people off, where it's like, oh, this feels like a way too continuity heavy thing. I mean, I'm of course super excited that it's Prime, and I kind of wish, if it's not an anthology show, that we weren't doing another prequel. But the only other thing that we could do that wouldn't be a prequel to stuff we've had before would be to go to 25th Century or very, very late 24th, and again do something post-destruction of Romulus. And I mean, it would have been, of course, really great to have done that, but I don't think anybody really expected that, especially with this first season, even when we thought it was anthology. So this doesn't entirely surprise me, or at least being a prequel thing, set in this period. That does surprise me a little bit. The idea being, let's try to really hardcore bring back the optimism, bring back this sense of discovery. I love that that's the name of the show. I think that's the absolute best possible title. Bring back the spirit of discovery, and just throw that word headlong at the show, and you know, make it what the original series was always supposed to be about. And I think that's all a really good idea, and so it makes sense that you would set this earlier when there's a lot more of the galaxy to explore, and we're still wet behind the ears, and well, you had a little bit of the sense with Enterprise of, let's try to bring back, and unfortunately it didn't quite work, especially early on, because we were working with a crew of writers, some of which were just, especially our showrunners at the beginning, who had just been doing it for so long they felt kind of burnout. At least that's always been my take on it. But there was always, and I've always got to give Berman and Braga this, there was always a little bit of the sense of, we live in a day and age where people don't care about NASA anymore, people aren't, even in the early 2000s, this seemed to be kind of true, where we don't have that spirit of discovery. Kids aren't being raised to think, maybe someday I'll get to go to Mars, and I want to be an astronaut, and I want to go into space, and I want to go find out everything there is to know about the universe. And we had much more of this modern cynicism, especially post 9/11, the sense of the future is not going to be a happy place, and we just have to do whatever we can to survive, as opposed to anticipating and being excited about the future. So setting it in an earlier period of the Star Trek canon makes a certain degree of sense. And you could say, you know, well, you could do exactly the same thing moving forward, and that's true, but getting it a little bit closer to when we are now, as opposed to moving so much farther beyond all of the canon that we've had already and all the exploration we've done already, I can kind of see the logic there of you have a little bit more of this sense of discovery, even though some of what we would be discovering would be things that Star Trek fans are going to know about already, except that Brian Fuller's talked a lot about, you know, new species and finding stuff that we don't know about already, and that's certainly a thing that you can do without breaking continuity or whatever. But it is definitely risky. I don't know how. The storytelling is really good, and of course, these days people really like these really immersive 13-hour movies before they like more episodic one-and-done stories for their television. I'm hoping that's enough to really entice people, and that they won't be scared away by the fact that this is cemented in a period of Star Trek history that they're not familiar with, and that they're not going to immediately recognize. It will also help it, though, to look a little bit more original series, and unless you did a show that was set between original series and the movies, which would be a strange thing to do now, I think. You know, it would be, if you did something like that, I think it would be, unless you set it in Abrams continuity, it would be a lot harder to get away with not making those sets look the same. And setting it in a just post-Enterprise period, you have the luxury of making it look more like the movies and more like the Enterprise TV show. And so you're building on, you know, whether or not you like what that show looked like, or you thought that made any sense with what we had before, and you know, whether you mind that creative license, you're able to make a thing look really good for present day without saying we've got to make it look like cardboard. So I can kind of see why you wouldn't want to do that, but that would be really the only other way I think that you could manage that. I think that setting it at the period that that it seems like they're probably they almost have to, based on that registry number. That kind of allows them to make something that feels a little bit more like the original series without going straight to original series era. So the ship design is based on the rejected Phase 2 design, and I remember seeing a schematic for that ship once and going, I'm kind of glad we didn't get that. And now we're getting that, and I wasn't immediately thrilled or excited about it. I've watched the teaser a couple times, and the more I look at it, the more it's growing on me, certainly. I imagine that within the context of the show, I will appreciate it a lot more. I mean, I'm hearing a lot of people that are complaining about it, and they're saying it doesn't look sleek like you expect Star Trek to, and that kind of thing. I imagine that it's that way with a purpose. You get a sense in the soundtrack in that teaser, if I can read into that at all, that it might be somewhat Klingon inspired, and there might be some thematic stuff there where, like, we are feeling the need to base things on our enemies in order to, I don't know, compete in the grand cosmic scheme. I mean, in the the galactic chessboard, or just we found some Klingon technology and they're ahead of us, because in Enterprise they are ahead of us, and so I could kind of see. I got kind of some Klingon inklings in that score, and the moment I saw that ship, the way they've rendered it now from that initial design, I was like, the back of that looks like a little bit like a D7 Klingon cruiser from TOS, and then I started thinking maybe, and this will be kind of my little speculation about the ship, maybe it is partially inspired by that, and maybe they got their hands on a Klingon ship and they've like reverse engineered it, and maybe it'll be a ship with a cloaking device. You know, after all, this is prior to Treaty of Algernon, and which was the thing about the Romulan cloak. But that said that they signed a treaty with Romulans that said, much later than this, that said that the Federation will not make a cloaking device. But this is before that, and maybe also that is some sort of a holdover from the Earth-Romulan War, assuming that this is post that. And it almost would have to be, unless it's set immediately after Enterprise. But given the fact that the show is called Discovery, like, the first thing I thought of when I thought about this period was, oh, cool, maybe we'll finally dramatize the Earth-Romulan War. I've been talking about this for a long time. It's something I've always wanted to see, especially when Berman, I think it was Berman, was teasing that as being maybe the next thing they did when Enterprise was canceled, and when and after Nemesis, before Abrams got his hands on it and we rebooted. I've always wanted to see that dramatized, but with the name being Discovery, it being another show about exploration, I kind of doubt that we're going to have a whole war, and frankly, if that's what we're doing, Fuller's right about it. Let's do some exploration before we do another giant war arc. We always go to those because they're really exciting, but you can, of course, have plenty of excitement in a an arc, in a big story about going out and exploring space, which is what Star Trek's about. So I'm not against ever doing another war story, but that was third season Enterprise, that was Dominion War. It might be fun, and that was Star Trek Into Darkness a little bit. It would be kind of nice to get away from that and do at least a first season that didn't have us in any kind of a big war with some race. We don't know anything about casting yet. We know that there's been a lot of talks with Tony Todd. There were rumors for a while that he might be the captain. I've talked about that some. I still really hope that's the case, or at the very least that he's in the show and a regular. I also would be really surprised if Jeffrey Combs wasn't in this show and finally a regular. He's not doing anything, as far as I know right now, as far as like regular television or in a big movie or anything. He was almost a regular on Enterprise. If it had gone one more season, Shran would have been on that ship, and he would have continued there. And so I'll be really surprised if there's not at least some kind of talk about him either there from the very beginning or being added in another season down the road. There's also been a lot of rumors about Nathan Fillion. And I think that would be quite the coup for Nathan Fillion to come on, and of course everybody's saying Nathan Fillion is the captain. I could see him playing some other role maybe also, but if Fillion is there, I imagine he would probably, I don't know, maybe he would do the show as a supporting character, but I imagine Fillion would want to be the star of the show. So if he's, and I could really see him as a 22nd, early 23rd century starship captain. If he's brought in, that would be quite the coup, right? Where you have Malcolm Reynolds, you have what's kind of the flip of the Federation captain in Firefly. You have what's kind of a subversion of that, and then he comes in and he plays the consummate starship captain, or maybe not the consummate captain. But but I don't know. We'll see if that ends up coming to fruition. So a lot of rumors about different people who might be captains. Like I said, the big thing I want to see, or the big character, or excuse me, the actor I most want to see in the captain's chair is Tony Todd. And I think that's about everything that I had. Again, as far as speculation goes, I'm certainly intrigued about this idea of multiple crews and what exactly that's going to mean, and this idea of getting to see other characters eventually, maybe. Not to read too much into that, but when he said that, it sure sounded like they maybe had a plan for it. Characters that we're familiar with coming into this show, and my big thing is I hope it's not another time travel show. Like doing time travel every now and again. Star Trek has always done that. From the very beginning, there was time travel, or almost the very beginning. First season TOS, there's always been time travel in Star Trek. But I just hope that it's not a big gimmicky thing where it's this timeline isn't the way it's supposed to be, just so that we can do crazy time travel stuff, and so that we can talk about things that the viewer knows about that our characters don't know about. I really hope it doesn't venture too much into prequel territory, and that we are simply filling in history while simultaneously telling some cool stories and moving forward, at least in a storytelling way, in a progressive storytelling kind of way. But that's my big thing, is I just hope that we don't do too much of that. Might we see Q in this show? I think that could be cool. Obviously, well, and I was going to say you would almost have to have some kind of a reason that Delancey looks as old as he does, but he was, aging throughout that show and was supposed to be a big cosmic entity, so I guess he was just doing it on purpose. It might be kind of fun if even in the past he shows up and there's just no explanation as to why he looks the way he does. But I don't know, other things, races and things we might see. Of course, again, Fuller talking a lot about doing new races. It'll be interesting to see who all is on that ship. I'd love to see a regular Andorian. I think that would be really cool, or a Tellarite. I think making us really invested in a Tellarite character could be really cool. I think it's maybe time to skip a Vulcan this time, just because we've been doing Spock in the new movies. We had a Vulcan in Voyager. We had a Vulcan in Enterprise. I don't know what more you can do with a character from that race without just repeating yourself, at least right after all of that. I mean, Vulcans are fascinating, don't get me wrong. You could, or even if somehow, I don't know, maybe you could have a half Vulcan, half something else. I don't know. I'm just spitballing and throwing stuff out there, but it might be cool to see some some important founding original series races, or founding Federation races that we've never actually done big characters of. That's kind of something I've always wanted to see. Again, I would imagine the Klingons will be a major force here, and the Romulans, if they're around, of course, once again, we can't know what they look like because we didn't find that out until the original series. So we went through the entire Earth-Romulan War without knowing what they look like. And of course, Enterprise had to finagle that. In original series, it was because there wasn't ship-to-ship communication, and it was easier for them to make that a mystery. But anyway, that's all I've got right now. Thanks a lot for watching, and if you have any feelings about what we know so far about Star Trek Discovery, or any or any speculation you want to throw in the comments, be sure to do that. When we know a little bit more, maybe down the road, a few months before the show starts, we may do a Discovery speculation video. I don't want to do one of those yet because we just don't know enough yet to build on, but I'm sure Sarah and I, or Adam and I, or the three of us, or even Brandon, will come in at some point and do a speculation video about the show. Anyway, I am certainly more than cautiously optimistic. I'm going to be really surprised if the show isn't absolutely fabulous. Not exactly the direction I expected it to go, but and again, I do still kind of wish it was anthology, but I am hopeful, I am excited, and Fuller is certainly, at least as far as what Star Trek is about and the grander ideas and the optimism and all of that, he's saying all the right things. So we'll see what it looks like. Thanks a lot for watching. I'm Captain Logan, and this concludes today's Captain's Log.